is my privilege to be able to be in a conversation with Chris in just a little bit later in the evening. But I just want to say how excited I am and how excited you all should be for the launch of The Weight of a Piano for Chris Kander's book. So maybe just one more round of applause for her marvelous. All of you are in for a treat this evening, especially, or this evening, but in addition, I've got the enviable position of having read the book, as I know a few of you have, and I'm a huge fan, and you're really, really in for a treat. It's just amazing watching Chris with each book just getting better and better, and this book is, I'm just a really big fan. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad that all of you are here, and I'm going to now turn it over to Chris Kander.
Pretty amazing to see this crowd. I'm so grateful to all of you, old and new friends and family, and some really special guests tonight that surprised me utterly. My agent Jess, who surprised me by flying in from New York. My friend Paul, who flew in from Atlanta to take some pictures, and those of you who drove in from out of town. I'm truly honored and grateful that you are all here. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the book and a little bit about what we're going to do tonight. It's a little unconventional. But The Weight of a Piano, in many ways, is about the places between the passions in our lives. It's about the way that we bear the burdens of our grief. It's how we find our way back to hope. It follows the interweaving stories of two women separated by 30 years and half a continent, and their shared connection to the same German-built, Tsarist-era upright Blüthner piano. Katya is a gifted Soviet concert pianist, and along with her young family, emigrates from Leningrad in 1980, and in the process, she loses her beloved Blüthner. 20 years later, Clara receives the same piano as a gift from her father for her 12th birthday. Tragically, they die a week later, and the piano becomes the only remaining symbol, the only physical connection that she has to her childhood. Now she's an adult. She's an auto mechanic in Bakersfield, California, on the heels of a terrible breakup, and has finally decided, after all of these years, to put the piano up for sale. But when the buyer shows up to take it, she realizes that she may have made the worst mistake of her life. And so impulsively, she follows him into the barren beauty of Death Valley National Park, where he plans to photograph it. And thus ensues a journey of the way that the history of the piano, Clara's connection to Katya, and the piano itself. And you know, everyone asks authors where they get their ideas for their books. And I have a really special story about where I got the idea for this one. It was 4 years ago, and I was at a book club meeting for my first novel, 11 Stories. And after the discussion ended, I overheard a woman telling a friend that she had finally found someone to take the piano that her father had given her when she was just a child. With his encouragement, she had been taking lessons for several months until his sudden death. And in his absence, that piano became a symbol of her grief, and so she stopped playing it. But even though she wasn't playing it, neither could she bear the idea of getting rid of it. And I think that all of us can understand an experience like that. We have objects in our lives that bear some sort of psychic or sentimental weight, and we may not always know what to do with them. And so I was immediately invested in this concern of how to get rid of a beloved, treasured object. In this case, a heavy, expensive, and burdensome one. And so I kind of inched over to her a little bit more and eavesdropped a little bit further. And I asked her if I could borrow this little piece of her personal history to become the basis of a novel. She sort of laughed and said yes. I'm sure at the time she thought that nothing would come of it. And I didn't think to look her up until 4 years later when I was writing the acknowledgments to this book. And we met for coffee and we had this great conversation. And she finished telling me about her piano story and her father. And I got to tell her a little bit about Clara and Katya. And I'm so grateful that Meredith is here tonight, and that I'm eternally grateful that she gave me the gift of this idea. But an idea alone does not a novel make. And when I started to write it, I realized that I had a lot of research to do. I am not a Soviet Jew. I've never lived in California. I'm not a mechanic, and I certainly don't play the piano. In fact, my musical talent ends at my ability to turn on the radio. So I had to rely upon the love and knowledge of a lot of experts. I talked to auto mechanics and refuseniks and immigrants, and for the piano I engaged professional musicians and composers, and I spoke with technicians and tuners and movers to understand the myriad aspects that go into piano playing and ownership. And there's a really cool story that I'd like to share. Early on in the process, I was connected with this octogenarian named Helga Kasimov, who, along with her late husband, is the owner of the oldest Blutner dealer in Los Angeles. And when I reached out to her, I thought maybe we'd have a 30-minute conversation, and it lasted for hours. And not only did she share with me her love of Blutner pianos and why they're so special, she told me about her husband who lived as a Soviet Jew in Russia, and what it was like to be a refusenik, and what it was like to emigrate to Los Angeles in the late 70s and early 80s. And like all the people that I spoke with and interviewed and relied on during the writing of this novel, she left an indelible impression on this book. I also didn't know very much about Death Valley National Park, which is where a great deal of this book is actually set. So in the beginning, I relied on conversations with professional photographers who had been to the park, frantic phone calls to park rangers, and many hours spent driving a virtual car around Google Maps, which was very helpful but insufficient. And when I finished the first draft of the book, I had the fortune of actually going to the park for a week, and it turned out to be the exact week that Clara and Greg were there in the novel. And I took along with me this little piano, this little metal piano, who I call Minnie B. And she's actually a pencil sharpener, which is incredibly apropos, I think. And I took her around the entire park and went to all the places in the book where Greg photographed the actual Blutner. And so over here you can see just a few of the images, the many, many photographs that I took while I was there. And I thought it would be really fun to share them with you, but also to give them to you. So I hope when you came in, you grabbed a ticket and dropped it into the raffle bowl, because we'll be giving them away at the end of the conversation later. So speaking of this piano in the book, I feel it's important to tell you that the Blutner is really, to me, as much a character as any of the humans that interacted with it. She has, and I do think of her as a she has a very rich history, beginning with her life as a tree high in a Romanian forest in the late 1800s. And later, as she absorbs all of the joy and grief and loneliness and exultation expressed through the action of her keys, and bears the indelible, ghostly impression of every touch, every tear shed at the keyboard. And at the end of the book, she feels very much like, an old babushka, an old woman who has very little left to give. So as strange as this may sound, I love her. I felt a deep connection to this piano, even though it didn't speak and I can't play music. And I think it was out of a desire to hear her express her own emotions that I commissioned an original piece of music from Connor Scott. And this piece is called Die Reise, which is German for the journey. And I'm so pleased that Connor was able to fly in from Atlanta to be a part of this performance. And after the play, he's going to perform this incredibly beautiful, haunting piece in public for the very first time. And I'm so grateful to you for that. So finally, before we move on, why this? Why the whole production? And it's because music is such an indelible part of this book. It spans geographic and cultural divides, and it really felt like a multimedia experience as I was writing it. And I thought that just simply reading a few pages from it wouldn't fully represent the way that it felt in my imagination. So I wrote a very short play based on 3 key scenes from the book and engaged an incredibly talented team of local artists who are going to help bring it to life. And I wanted to introduce the story and the characters in a way that you wouldn't just hear them. I wanted you to experience them. And so, without further ado, I'd like for you to enjoy this interpretation of The Weight of a Piano.
Good evening. We're from the theater. We don't use mics. So this one's going out to those of you in the back. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Chris for having me. Mark from Browse's Bookstore, home of all my future books. Okay, so as Chris explained, you're going to hear 3 scenes, 3 chapters. We're starting in chapter 2. So if you want to know what happens in chapter 1, Chapter 2, inside Kappa's Express Lube Auto Shop. Clara is working on an engine. Peter enters.
Hey, Clara, the guy with the rack and pinion job's back again. Says it's still making noise.
Same noise or new?
Popping bolts, probably.
Can you do it? I'm not done with this filter.
I promised the Corvette would be done by 5.
A phone rings in the office.
Okay, give me 15. I'll get it up in the air and see what's going on. But if it's the mounting bolt, you'll have to do the alignment again. You got time?
For you?
Stop.
Kidding? Yeah, I can do it.
Clara, phone for you. It's Ryan. You might want to take it in the office.
Hey,
You're not answering your cell.
I'm working.
You know, whatever, Claire. Listen, I'm taking off for a couple of days so you can pack up your stuff, all right? I really want you to be out by the weekend,
Wait,
okay?
what? Seriously? I thought we were still talking about this.
Claire, did you not hear me last night? I'm tired of waiting for you to make up your mind. You just don't want what I do.
I never said I didn't want the same thing. I'm just asking for time. Ryan, please.
Wouldn't be having this conversation if all you needed was more time. It's over, Claire. I need to move on.
So that's it then. After 2 years together, you're giving me, what, 4 days to move? How do you expect me to do that? And where am I supposed to get the money for it?
I found you an apartment in East Bakersfield. And already put down first and last month's rent.
Jesus, Ryan! We couldn't have talked about this first, East Bakersfield?
Oh, do you really care where you live? It seems like all you really care about is that damn garage.
You okay?
Will you help me move?
Of course, you know I will.
The following week, Peter and his 2 brothers helped Clara move. She didn't have much. After starting over as an orphan 14 years before, she never got into the habit of collecting things. But she needed help with a futon that would become a bed again. A small table with chairs and her bike. And she needed help with the upright Lutner piano that her father had given her for her 12th birthday, a week before both he and her mother had died.
Careful.
That landing's pretty small.
It's okay, I already measured it. The hard part's gonna be the turn at the top.
Alex, you and I'll go first and pull. Teddy, Clara, you'll push from the bottom.
It'd be a hell of a lot easier if we had a crane.
Or if you put on a little muscle.
I cut it out, you 2. Now, Clara, you stay on this side next to the building. Teddy will stay on your right. It's heavier on your side, Teddy, so Be careful. Alex and I can manage most of the weight, but we need you guys to guide it up. Ready?
Okay. Go.
Stay with me. Okay.
Hold it!
Oh, Teddy, rascal! Lean it back. Get it off her.
Oh, God, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay.
That night, Peter took her to the doctor. At the hospital, they put her broken wrist in a cast and told her she'd have to wear it for 6 weeks.
Thank you.
Clara returned to her unfamiliar new apartment. The quiet was unsettling, so she went to the Blutner and pulled out one of her old pieces of sheet music. After her parents had died, Clara had taken piano lessons. By then, she was working with her Uncle Jack in his garage, so she knew her hands were good for something. But she was never able to make the music and the emotion behind the piece translate to her fingers. When she sensed that her music teachers were giving up hope, she could find new. Finally defeated, she had given up too. Now, starting over again, an idea she never before entertained came to her and home they settled in. For sale. Antique upright Blutner piano built circa 1905. Ebonized case in good condition. See photos for specific markings. Needs tuning, possibly new strings and hammerheads. Asking
$3,000.
Alexander Scriabin's Prelude in C-sharp minor. Opus 9, number 1, for the left hand alone. Chapter 7, Leningrad, February 1980, Katya and Mikhail's apartment.
Here I am.
What did you bring? No milk?
They ran out. I can try again tomorrow.
You have to work tomorrow.
Afterward, then.
He pours vodka into 2 glasses.
And Mama?
Resting. She didn't feel well again today.
Katusha, we have to go. I can't do this anymore.
I can't drink the baby. Please, don't talk about this now.
We have to talk about it, Katya. Listen to me. We can have a new life in America, a happier life. Someplace warm. We can buy produce and milk and meat and butter whenever we want.
No, I keep telling you, our home is here in Leningrad, not America.
Leningrad is a beautiful city, but it's a terrible town. It doesn't feel like home anymore. It's no good for us.
And about our friends, our parents?
Irina and Peter are gone.
How? We can't change money. Did Pyotr tell you he was leaving? Are you making this up?
There are ways. I've been asking around. You remember when we first met? Such big dreams we had, so many plans. You were going to be a famous concert pianist. I was going to be a top engineer. But look, all you do is play music for God's concert now, making no money, even though you're so good. You didn't go to the conservatory only to play music the Kremlin allows, did you? You taught me that. And why should Brezhnev be the highest musical authority? You're 25 already, Katya. We have to think about the future.
Our future is here, Misha, in Leningrad.
I can't move up. I'm the best one there, and I can't move up. They call me Zed now. Did you know that? That fucking Vasily telling everyone, fucking KGB. I don't even have a nose like my father's, and still they know. How do you expect me to rise up, Katya? It's hard enough to feed ourselves. Now we have the baby. In America, there is no communism. There is no limit. Don't you understand?
No, that is not fair. You are not saying this because of Grisha. You only want to go because of you.
No, it is all for you, Katya. You deserve so much better than what we get here. Going to America, we will be happier.
I don't want to go.
I can't do anything here. You understand that? I am a Jew. We are both Jews, and here I don't get the position I
Misha,
deserve.
please!
You can't tell me no. And besides, you won't be playing concerts anyway for a while. You have to take care of Grisha. By the time we get to America, he will be bigger. Then you can play. But I have to take care of everyone. You can't say anything about it.
Why do you get to make all the choices? Why don't you think of me?
I am thinking of you. Aren't you listening? Besides, it's too late. I filed the application yesterday. They made me quit work.
Quit work? Why? They will charge us with
It's
parasitism.
required will be a process.
Oh, it could take years to get approved for exit, Misha. You don't think I know what's happening all this time while we wait? We will be enemies of the state, enemies of the people. You know the moral code. He who does not work, neither will he eat. We will lose our friends. We will lose water, electricity. How are we going to take care of the baby then, huh? How will we make money?
I have a little saved. Not much. But your father seems to be doing good. The piano tuning business always seems to be doing good. If we need the money, we can ask him for
I
it.
won't ask him for money.
Then we will find some other way.
How? Sweeping the streets? Begging?
Stop! That is being selfish. I will not allow that kind of talk. It is already too late. I told you.
How long will it take? What will happen? Where will we go?
Austria first, or so I'm told. And from there to Italy until America sends us our entrance visa. Maybe it will take a year, maybe longer.
And what will we do in these places? Where will we live? How will we eat? And what am I supposed to do with my piano, huh? Carry it around on my back?
I am talking to other people who are looking to go. There are agencies who can help us, Jewish agencies, to help us get what we need. We can bring a small amount, maybe 3 or 4 suitcases each. But no piano.
No piano.
When Katya was 8 years old, an elderly, blind German in her apartment building, who had been her father's client, bequeathed the Blüthner to her. Father said the German's gift was proof of the goodness in mankind's heart. To Katya, it meant that there was magic to be discovered in it. She began picking the notes out one by one, learning their order. Her father encouraged her and taught her what he knew. The piano became her constant companion and the first great love of her life. She couldn't guess how many notes she had played on its keys, first one by one and later, and the beautiful, complicated pieces that transported her to a place inside her mind like nothing else could. She had played it nearly every day for the past 17 years. When she moved from her parents' home in Zagorsk to study at the conservatory in Leningrad, she had insisted on taking it on the 800-kilometer journey. Besides her family, it was her only treasure. Even as she was forced to leave Leningrad, the piano was something she could not, would not, leave behind.
Katya! I will find a way. We will take the piano, yes? Are you hearing me? I love you.
Beethoven Sonata, A Thérèse.
in that piece, the crosses could fill a cemetery.
Chapter 16. At the casino parking lot at dawn. Clara is asleep in her car. Greg enters carrying 2 to-go cups of coffee.
Hello?
Don't!
Oh, wait, it's okay. Are you Clara?
Who are you? What do you want?
Clara, it's Greg. Greg Zeldin. I'm the one who bought your piano.
You mean rented?
Right, rented.
What are you doing here?
I should be asking you that question. I didn't know how you'd take it.
Cream. Oh,
Oh, sorry. Napkin?
uh,
You're probably wondering how I knew it was you.
I assume your mover saw me at the gas station last night when we stopped along the way.
They did, apparently, but they didn't put 2 and 2 together until they came out to check on the moving truck this morning and saw your car out here with you asleep in it.
Well,
Yeah. I got in late myself. Flew into Vegas and then rented a car. God, what a shithole that place is, huh? Every time I go there, it feels like my soul corrodes a little bit. And besides, there's no use trying to bet in those big casinos. They treat you like a king, or at least some sort of low-level nobleman, and some uninspired waitress who probably had a lousy childhood brings you round after round while you spend your money, slots, blackjack, whatever. And if you start doing okay, well, they don't care too much for that, do they? The house guys with their cheap suits start moving in, watching you. Now, this is always supposed to win in the end, isn't it? You haven't heard that saying? House always wins? Well, places like this, they don't care too much. Not for a while, anyway. Little action always fires up the indigents.
I don't really gamble.
Yeah, so says the girl who followed a moving truck all the way up to the middle of nowhere.
Well, why are you here then? In the middle of nowhere with my piano?
I told you I'm going to photograph it.
Where?
Various places.
Like venues, casinos?
No. Outdoors.
Out in the open?
Yes.
But what about the elements, the dirt?
I told you, too, not to worry about it. I'll take good care of it. I promise.
I just don't understand why you're doing this.
I should think that $5,000 would answer any questions you have about my plan for the next week or so. Or does minding your own business cost extra?
You're right. It's your business. But technically, it's also mine. I'm not asking you what you're going to eat for dinner or when you're going to get up in the morning. I'm just asking about my piano.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been so insensitive. Obviously, you wouldn't have come all the way out here if you weren't concerned, but I can assure you we will take good care of it. Juan and Beto are good. We'll be careful.
So, Death Valley, huh?
My mother's favorite place.
You said she played the piano. Do you play too? Your website said you studied music.
Oh, I study, but I don't play. Do you?
No.
That's interesting, isn't it? Here we are bickering over a piano that neither of us plays. Oh, I haven't even seen it yet. Do you want to show it to me before you take off?
Sure.
What happened to your hand?
Oh, I broke it while moving the piano, actually. Too bad I didn't have your guys to help me move it. They made it look pretty easy. Although if I hadn't broken my hand, I wouldn't have listed it for sale in the first place.
Well, in that case, I'm not entirely sorry you broke it. I am sorry if you got hurt, though. I didn't notice these dents in the pictures.
Oh, I know, I'm sorry. I don't know how they got there. They actually were a lot worse when we first got it, but we had the case repaired and refinished.
Yes. Yes.
Do you know what that marking is?
It's a name. Grisha, I can't believe it. I can't fucking believe it.
What is it?
Where did you get this?
It was a gift from my father.
When?
when I turned 11. Why?
Well, what, and now you're...
I just turned 26.
Okay, so that was, what, 1998?
Yes. Are you okay? Why are you asking me?
Do you have any
all this?
idea where your father got this?
No, actually, I never had a chance to find out. My parents died right after he gave it to
In
me.
a fire.
How did you know about the fire? Did you research me?
No. It didn't occur to me to research you. I had no reason to. When I saw your listing for an upright Blutner, I thought this is exactly what I wanted. The right era, the right color. I just thought maybe they're not so rare after all. I would have researched you if I'd known that your Blutner was this Blutner. All this time I thought this Blutner was gone. Ashes to ashes. Dust to dust. That's what my mother told me anyway.
I don't understand. How did your mother know about this fire?
Because before this piano was yours, it belonged to her.
What? How do you know that?
The marking, the one on the back, the name.
Grisha.
Grigori in Russian, Greg in English. Grisha is what my mother called me.
To be continued in the novel. And now, as promised, Connor Scott will play Die Reise.
I have a few questions I was going to ask you about the book, and without giving anything away, I hope. I'll be very kind of vague in that respect. So I think as all of you can see, the book is obviously about music and about the piano, especially, but it's also about the absence of music. And three of the main characters all have this void in their lives. And it's tied to that same instrument, the piano. And was the idea of absence something that you were consciously working toward when writing the book, or is it something that kind of came to you after? Because I know when you're writing, sometimes you get done and you look and you're like, oh, that thing is there that I never planned to be there, and it's wonderful. It's kind of, serendipitous. So was that absence something that you planned, or?
is such a great question. But before I answer it, I just want to say thank you to the amazing crew who performed that stunning excerpt. So, thank you all again. It was really incredible to see it come to life like that. But to your question, and yes, absolutely. As I was going along, as I always do, I'm always surprised by things that emerge, themes that emerge. I don't ever start out with intention. I don't plot. I start out with vague ideas, and in this case, I started out with the idea of this piano, and I wasn't thinking of it as a musical instrument so much as I was thinking of it as a burden, as a physical object that was a burden. And as I was exploring that aspect of it and Clara's relationship to it, it struck me that, but before Clara got it, it had already had this very long history. And somebody else had loved it. It was 100 years old. It had been preserved and passed down. And so that became interesting. For Clara, who couldn't play the piano, there was an absence of music, for which she felt a little guilty, I presume. And so I thought, well, certainly there was someone for whom it was a passionate part of her life. And the Blüthner in the story is loved and lost and found and lost. And so it's constantly changing hands, and it's either being played or not being played. And so that interplay of music and silence emerged later as a theme. You know, the fact that we are all connected and affected by music. We don't even have to be musicians in order to appreciate it. And it can have such a profound emotional response. There's a part later in the book where Greg is trying to explain to Clara why he's taking pictures of the Blüthner in Death Valley. And he gives a very impassioned response about wanting to photographically represent what it's like when the music stops. And so I just thought it was a really interesting idea, the way that physical objects and music can mean so much to us, and those meanings can change over time.
Thank you. You had mentioned earlier, when you had spoken earlier, that the research you had done for things that, you know, you're not a musician, you're not a Russian Jew, etc. And when you read the book, you'll see that there's you can tell an enormous amount of research went into the book, but it's never, ever heavy-handed. It feels very organic, and it just feels very natural, and it feels right. Can you talk a little bit about the research you did for this book? I mean, some of it is auto mechanics and things like that. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about maybe your process in doing research when you're writing a novel.
I think because I have a background in journalism and for so many years wrote for Health and Fitness magazine and other magazines, I got really comfortable just picking up the phone and calling an expert and asking them to share some of their time and expertise with me so that I could understand the subject matter better. And novel writing has been no different. I'm sort of bold when I'm looking for information. I'll just ask people. In the case of the auto mechanics in this story, it's a fun fact that the Kappas Auto Lube is actually based on the garage where I take my car and have for many years. It's a Greek family, and so Peter is always the guy that works on my car, and his late mother, Anna, who is, she is also represented in the book, they directly influenced their characters. And so that was really fun. And anytime I needed to ask questions about auto repair or life in a garage, I would just drive half a mile down the street and hang out in the shop for a while. So that was great. And I made other mechanic friends too along the way so that I could understand more about, you know, the technical aspects. But in general, research is such an important part because I can't possibly know all of the things that I want to write about. But it's a great opportunity to learn because I get to borrow all of this passionate knowledge that people have, and it's esoteric, it's strange. I mean, I call plumbers and electricians and priests and auto mechanics and, you know, refuseniks. And that was a really special part, is getting to know a lot of the people whose lives kind of mimicked that of Katya and Mikhail and their immigration. But to your original comment about it being not obvious, I think that to write authentically, I try to take in way more information than I'm going to regurgitate on the page, because I don't want it to sound like a report. So I have to internalize it and then write it as though it's so second nature that I don't have to report every piece of data that I have picked up along the way. So, thank you. I'm glad it does.
And really, just to add to what you had said, working at the bookstore, you get a lot of authors, and you kind of take what they say, and it reminds me, I cannot remember the author. I know he lives in Austin, but in kind of adding to what you said, that a lot of times novelists, or most times, don't write because they know things. They're not writing going, this is what I know. They're writing to discover things. You're writing to find things out. So it's almost like a novel many times, I think, for a writer. And in this case, you want to discover and find out things for the book itself. It's not like you're, writing down everything you know. Yeah, which is great. Okay, this is kind of another writer's question, but you can see just based on the performance that there's two periods of time, there's basically two narratives, and I was wondering, were those written simultaneously? Were you able to write the part in Cold War Russia kind of consecutively and then come back and write the part in California, or vice versa? Or how was that kind of process?
Okay, so the end result of the book is that it's equally balanced between Clara's story and Katya's, but it didn't start out that way. When the idea was first presented to me, I was really focused on that premise, and so I focused exclusively on Clara's story. I wanted to know who she was, why she felt like this piano was a burden, what was her history, how was she carrying it into her adulthood and what that meant. And it wasn't until I realized that it really needed the counterbalance of, for Clara it's a burden, for somebody else it needed to be a blessing. And so Katya originally was merely backstory, and I kind of wrote her sections as flashbacks, and they were really more about the piano itself than Katya. But in the second draft, she emerged even more clearly, and then in another draft, and the very last draft, actually, I have to give huge kudos to my agent, who encouraged me to really go 100% in with equal page time for both characters. So sort of toward the end, I was writing both simultaneously, chronologically, because I wanted the narrative to flow the way that the reader would experience it, and I felt if I gave myself, time to write one and then the other and then figure out how they went together, it would feel patched. And so I wanted to write it consecutive or simultaneously, so that their storylines could intersect at really meaningful moments, and that they would lead naturally from one into the other.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and what it is I noticed that you had that small pencil sharpener piano that you brought with you on the trip, and so Clara and Greg, the characters in the book, two of the characters, have a connection to this inanimate object, this piano, because of its relationship to different people, parents, etc. Do you believe personally there's a connection between the people we love and the objects they're connected to? Does that make sense? I know it's a little kind of maybe metaphysical, but yeah, do you believe in the relationship between people and objects?
I totally do. I think that it's hard to separate the objects that we receive from people or purchase with people or someone makes. You can't unbraid them from that person. But what's interesting is when those physical items are handed down and some of those stories are lost, maybe in translation, or they're diluted, and so that sentimental freight sort of falls away. But, because I can think back on even buying souvenirs and putting them somewhere, and then years later looking at it and thinking, why did I buy that? I don't even remember what I did, but in contrast to that, there are items that I've received from my parents, from my family, from friends, items that people have made for me that I could never not feel that connection with. And I love it. And so I think that surrounding ourselves with those items that bring back those memories and create those inexorable connections is a real gift beyond just the item itself.
All right, excellent. So I think people earlier there was people were able to write questions because we wouldn't have time to kind of answer everyone's question if people have questions, a large portion, which I'm sure many of you do. So we were able to variously kind of pick randomly questions from the audience before the event began. And so I will ask 3 questions, and then that'll be that. Tell us about your writing style and how it differs from other writers.
That's a hard one. You know, I don't know all writers, and I can't speak for all writers, but I've heard that question asked and answered a lot of times. And I think that people are always interested in what happens what's the magic that goes into making of a book. And it's not magic. It's just a lot of hard work. And I think I can say this on behalf of all writers, you included, that the thing that I think all writers experience is a sense of discipline. There's no shortcut. It can't happen fast. Good work takes time and thought and editing and practice. But what may make me different is maybe my specific approach to discipline, because I'm equally analytical and creative. And so some of you may know this about me already. Certainly my family does. But when I was writing my very first novel, I'd been working for about 6 months, and I was just curious about what my average daily output was. And so I knew the day I had started, and I knew how many words I had completed by this time. And so I simply did the math and came up with a daily output of 0.87 pages per day. And that came out to just under 300 words per day. And I thought, this is brilliant, because 300 words a day is just under a page, and I can totally do that. It's not that hard. And so that became my mantra, and it became my daily quota. 14 years later, it's still how I govern my writing life. I have a daily quota of 0.87 pages a day. I can always do more, but I can never do less.
Okay, another question is, and I think you kind of referenced this before, but did you travel on a literary pilgrimage for this novel?
So I did talk a little bit about this, but I will say that going to Death Valley was such an incredible experience. It is an otherworldly place. I don't know if you can see from these photos very much, but the scale of the park, it makes you feel like you've landed on the moon. You can walk for a mile and not get anywhere and feel like you wonder how possibly is this place contained on Earth. And because I had written a whole first draft of the novel without actually being there, when I went, I was able to correct a lot of the mistakes and assumptions that I had made. Nothing tragic, and probably nothing that people who weren't a professional photographer and a Death Valley expert would even notice. That Venn diagram is probably pretty small. But I like to do things accurately, and so I loved the fact that I was able to actually be there the same week that my characters were there, and I could see the time that the moon set, and I could kind of get a sense of the scope of the park, and I could understand these incredibly majestic places where Greg was photographing the piano. So I'm incredibly grateful that I was able to do it at that time, and it really makes me feel that I don't ever want to write a novel where I don't go and experience the setting as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, reading the novel, and I'm so excited for everyone to read it. The entire book, but the passages in Death Valley, in Bakersfield, wherever you are, you really get that sense of place, I think, in geography. It's really great. Okay, last question. Do you set out a plot or prefer going wherever the ideas take you?
Excellent question. And the answer is an emphatic, I never plot. Writers know this phrase, they're either a plotter or a pantser. And flying by the seat of your pants is where that comes from. And that's the only way I can enjoy writing, really. I mean, it's one thing to have an idea, a beginning place, but I have to really start writing in order to understand who and what I'm writing about. And as I do that, it's amazing the way that snippets of other experiences or ideas or memories or observations will sort of magnetically adhere themselves to the original idea. And it just sort of grows like that, like a cloud. I can't explain it, but the idea of trying to predict it in a linear way makes me very sad. I don't think I could ever do it. And if I did, I think that would be the end of my literary career. And I don't want that to happen. I feel like I'm just getting started.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This has just been a pleasure. What a great evening. Yeah.